Gydol Cymru. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Audit Committee here at Digital Healthcare Wales. We will be joined later by Ivan Evans, the Executive Director of Strategy, who will be responding to the internal audit report on the Welsh Intensive Care Information Programme and the Audit Wales Digital Transformation Report and DHCW's response and the remit letter delivery report. Welcome also to Sam Morgan, Director of People and OD, and Anna Evans, POD Directorate Manager, who's joining us for the Board Assurance Framework deep dive into performance appraisal and development reviews. Welcome also to Alexander Lawrence, Quality Management Systems Manager, who's attending in Paul Evans' absence to present the Quality and Regulatory Compliance Report and the Annual Quality Report. And welcome to Martin Lewis, who is presenting the Welsh Intensive Care Information Programme System Advisory Report. You will note that we have a full agenda, so in the interests of time, perhaps you can all introduce yourselves as and when you make a contribution. As usual, we are recording this morning's meeting on Teams. We are holding it virtually, and the recording will be available on DHCW's website. And as usual, today's committee papers are also available to the public on our website. We are planning to finish today's meeting by about 12:25 at the latest. There will be a short break, which we are planning between sections 4 and 5 of today's agenda. And our private session is scheduled to start at 12:40. Diolch. So we'll move on to apologies for absence. I have apologies from Nathan Couch, Audit Wales, and apologies from Paul Evans, the Head of Quality Assurance and Regulatory Compliance. Can I check whether there are any declarations of interest on today's agenda? No, I can't see any hands up, so let's move on then to part 2 and to the consent agenda. As usual, to ensure that we focus on business critical activity, we will be using the consent agenda, and I'm assuming that you've all read the papers under part 2. Can I just check whether there are any matters you would wish to move from the consent agenda to the main agenda? Please indicate if that is so. But I can't see any indication to that effect, so I therefore conclude that committee members are happy to approve and note all of the items as outlined. Specifically then, we are approving the minutes, item 2.1, from committee meetings held on the 7th of April this year, both public and private abridged minutes, and the extraordinary meeting of the final accounts held on June the 24th. We are noting the NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership Committee Assurance Report, item 2.2. We are noting the contents of the Forward Work Plan, item 2.3, including items scheduled to come to future committee meetings. We are noting the Standards of Behaviour Report, item 2.4, noting the Welsh Health Circular Biannual Report, item 2.5. We are noting the Estates and Compliance Report, item 2.6 for assurance. And finally, we are approving the Consultation and Document Approval Report. Thank you. So let's move on then to today's main agenda and to part 3 and to the action log. You'll see from your papers that there is one action captured from our committee meeting held on April the 7th. That, I'm told, is underway and will be received at the next committee meeting. So we are being asked to note, unless there are any observations, we are being asked to note the status of the action log, which I'm sure we are happy to do so. Diolch. That brings us then to part 4 and to the section on audit and counter fraud. I will therefore hand over now to Stephen Cheney, who is Head of Internal Audit at NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership, to go through the Internal Audit Progress Report. Croeso mawr, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Quite a short item, actually, this time. It's just to confirm that the two reports come into today's sessions, conclude the 25-26 programme of work, and we are well underway with the 26-27 programme of work. In fact, we are making good progress and approaching draft reporting stage on a few of those. So, as with previous years, we try to ensure an even flow of work and reports to each audit committee. And as with 25-26, we're hoping to be in the same position again. So, other than that, there's probably nothing to flag up. Receiving very good engagement, making good progress, as said, and in a good position for the start of the year. So welcome any questions at all.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there any questions? It's quite straightforward. I can see Chris Morton's hand up. Chris.
Diolch, Marion. Thanks, Stephen, for the overview. Just a quick clarification question, please. In terms of the grip and control work, is that still planned for 26-27, and is that included within the sustainable funding review, or is that separate? So just to clarify that point, please.
Thank you. When I said it was a simple update, there's actually quite a lot more detail behind it, but the summary position is quite simple. The sustainable funding piece of work is exactly that. It's intended to be a ring-fence time for any work around financial grip and control, and in particular, the self-assessment work that has taken place already and will continue to take place. The idea is for it to be a national piece of work, so completed at each of our clients across Wales, to allow economies of scale, but also comparisons as well. So the answer is yes, the time is ring-fenced for that. If at some point it's decided that it would be better suited to do it, say, within next financial year, then we would utilise the time for a similar piece of work instead. But yes, we've tried to cover a variety of permutations and allocate some time and just waiting to agree what that approach would look like across the whole of Wales. So hopefully that helps.
So to clarify, that includes all the health boards and all the special health authorities in Wales?
The majority, I would say all but maybe a couple, but certainly the health boards have time in within their plans. It's very much, something is going to be done, or we're hoping something will be done, just not sure what it will be as yet. But once that point's been clarified, we have the time available to pick it up, and whenever suits each individual client as well. If it's sooner, that's great, but we can do it whenever. So.
Thank you, and of course we'll be coming back to financial grip and control again later on today's agenda. Diolch, Stephen, for that update on the internal audit plan. I'll now then invite Martin Lewis to present the single audit report for review, and that is the Welsh Intensive Care Information Programme Advisory Report, as Stephen noted. No assurance rating provided for this review because of the inherent risks facing the delivery of the programme. And we will be joined by Ivan Evans to respond to the audit report. So over to you then, Martin. Diolch.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take it as read and be quite brief with this, because, as you say, it's an advisory review report. The overall aim was to ensure that the HCW was implementing and monitoring actions regarding the intensive care system. As I said, there are inherent risks to the programme which are outside the HCW's control. Having said that, following the independent review and report, the HCW has implemented a load of the actions from that. It's got now an improved position for the programme with a better governance and clearer governance structure and improved stakeholder engagement mechanisms. So there are 4 matters raised in the report. The actions for those have largely been completed in the time between reporting and finalisation. The first one is at the time of the audit, there hadn't been a deeper lessons learned exercise that fully digged into the clinical safety and hazards and engagement issues that had been in the programme earlier on. The second point is that the lessons identified in the independent review and from learning within the programme itself hadn't been fully recorded in the organisation's lessons register, although we do note they had been shared within the programme and cross teams, but that was more kind of verbally and informally rather than in the register. The third point is at the time of the audit, there wasn't a named clinical safety lead on the programme board. We're not saying that there wasn't anyone involved in clinical safety, it's just they weren't formally named within the terms of reference for that kind of governance arrangement. And then the last point is that not all the health boards are now included in the programme. A couple of step back, which may have a significant impact on the success of the programme and the endpoint delivery. There's no assurance rating because of the risks of the programme, but from our perspective, the actions and progress made by DHCW are pretty good. So happy to take any questions.
Apologies, folks. I dropped out for a moment then, and I'm sorry to have missed the end of your introduction. Some issue with the Wi-Fi connection, I think. In that case, then, can I turn to Ivan Evans, who's here as Director of Strategy, to respond to that audit report? Ivan.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn, Marian. So I'm Ivan Evans, the Executive Director of Digital Strategy. I'm the lead executive for the WCIS programme. Martin, thank you very much, and the team for the work that you've done on this. As everybody on the call, I think, will probably know, there's quite a long saga to WCIS, and there are lots of lessons learned and things to reflect on, I think, for us in terms of the governance, the controls, and the risks that are outside the span of the formal governance of the programme. So originally established in the collaborative, Clinical Network took a strong role, the HCW had a role, Welsh Government stepped in some time ago, and we're still in a position where there are multiple channels or multiple scope of governance that are overlapping, which is probably not the way that we would optimally want to design a programme, but it is what it is, and we're working as hard as we can to get through this, and currently working very closely with Welsh Government at what I hope are the final stages of a programme reset. As you noted, the actions were very well, the comments and the recommendations and the reflections from internal audit were very welcome. We've actioned 3 of the 4, I think, we've already completed, and the 4th is to be completed by the end of August. So that's our general posture on WCIS, is to be as transparent, to get as many eyes on it as possible in order to give us as much confidence as we can have in the remainder of the programme delivery, and then to get on actions promptly in order to complete those, so that we're taking any uncertainty that we can identify or any areas of improvement, taking them forward as quickly as possible. So the report has been a very helpful part of that. I'm very pleased that it's here in a public meeting to give it the transparency that it needs across the system. It is another of our collaborative programs. As you know, one of the health boards has pulled back. Clearly, each organisation is sovereign; they make their own decisions. But we're working with the remaining health boards, all of whom have committed now to to the completion of the phase 1 reset, including Betty Cadwaladr. So we're currently in close negotiation with the Welsh Government in order to confirm funding and the restart of the programme. So diolch yn fawr iawn.
Diolch yn fawr, Ivan, and it's pleasing to note that the majority of those actions, as you say, have been completed since this audit was completed. Can I ask whether there are any questions on this audit which we are being asked to note for assurance? There don't appear to be any. Pleasing also to note that Betsy Cadwaladr, as you say, have joined the table, as it were, since this audit was completed. So it's a much firmer and more positive position than probably was the case when this audit started as well. But clearly lessons to be learnt and have been noted by the organisation, and we clearly welcome this sort of audit. It highlights some challenges that we have been working under, and it's pleasing to note the positivity with which the organisation has responded. So we are receiving and noting that audit report for assurance, and thank you, Martin, for your work on this, and thank you to the wider internal audit colleagues for your observations. Unless there are any other comments, and I can't see any of the hands up, we will move on to the Audit Wales update. And I will turn then to Andrew Dorton, who will present the Digital Transformation Report and DHCW's response. And under this section, we also have the Remit Letter Delivery Report and the Audit Inquiry Letters. So, Andrew, croeso mawr, bore da.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to say we've got the audit updated now. I'm not going to go into it in lots of detail, just to highlight the accounts work is complete and the audit inquiries letter is on the agenda. That's in there for information. The performance audit update indicates that we've now obviously completed the digital transformation agreement letter work. Our estates review is complete, as in the field work. We're in the process of drafting it. It should be issued shortly for comment on factual accuracy. And then we have worked on wellbeing of future generations. That's started now, so it's promising that we've made early progress and inroads into that. And that's progressing well. And then we've got the structured assessment work, which is likely to start probably a little bit later, and that's the same across the whole of Wales. So it's more late summer that we're looking to start it. Usually we'd sort of try to kick the work off probably in sort of June, July time. But overall, we should have the entire work programme completed by the end of the financial year. So I think it's probably reflecting a more positive picture than we had last year. So I'm pleased to say that. Just really wanted to highlight in the update report that we've also included links to articles that we published recently. So we've got one on unscheduled care, and that summarises the findings from a number of reviews across the whole of Wales. And we've got a similar link to the planned care reports as well. So we've produced a short insight article on that. And if anybody is at all interested, there is a link to our strategic equality plan, which was published this year for information.
Thank you very much for that update. I can't see any questions, any hands up certainly. So we're noting that update, and I'll ask you to introduce the digital transformation report, if you will, Andrew. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Thank you. So the digital transformation work is part of a suite of work across the whole of Wales. So we've undertaken it across all health bodies. It's probably slightly more difficult to deliver in DHCW because the nature of the organisation meant that, yes, we're covering DHCW's own internal arrangements, so it's very difficult to sort of disentangle that to sort of some of the wider strategic remit that the organisation has. So it's probably been a little bit more challenging. We've made really good progress now across all of the bodies. I think all of the reports are out in draft or finalised, and most have gone through committees as well. So overall, that's sort of looking positive. As I say, the work here focuses on the internal arrangements, but we can't divorce that from some of the wider aspects as well. So if I just quickly go through some of the key findings from the work. We found a good strategic leadership, but need for clearer plans for DHCW's own digital transformation. So I found clear strategy overall, but limited detail on internal digital priorities. We found the board demonstrating strong ownership for digital transformation, but also that the governance and oversight could be strengthened by focusing more on sort of outcomes and benefits rather than actions and activities. And I think that's something that we have commented previously on also in our structured assessment work. We think the organisation has a good understanding of its national digital risks, but lacks sort of full oversight on its internal digital risks. So things like cybersecurity governance is well established, artificial intelligence is developing, but there's probably a little bit more on AI in terms of understanding what you're trying to achieve in terms of internal benefits, and also AI related risks. DHCW's own risk management arrangements focusing primarily, and I guess understandably, on the national strategic priorities, but there's a bit, again, less visibility of internal digital transformation risks. And there is also a need for a consolidated plan for addressing internal digital infrastructure risks and gaps. So a bit more focus on some areas there. The organisation is aiming to strengthen skills and retain staff. Excuse me. It doesn't yet have a complete picture of workforce capability, and as you all know, and it's been a long-standing challenge, recruitment and retention of digital professionals is a particular challenge and has been for a long time for DHCW, and that's probably something which is common across most of the bodies in terms of their digital departments. The organisation is involving staff effectively in digital transformation and taking appropriate action to reduce digital exclusion and building stronger partnerships with your key stakeholders. And you're focusing on the national digital programs is positive, but again, there probably needs to be a little bit of a greater focus on the internal digital transformation and try to demonstrate impact of progress. So it's a bit of a mixed report. It certainly recognises areas of good practice and a few areas of important. I think probably my take from it would be that it is probably just about making the internal digital transformation and improvements maybe a little bit more visible. We've made 6 recommendations, and all of those have been accepted by management with appropriate actions and implementation dates. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I will note that I wasn't directly involved in the reviews. There may be some areas which I might need to take back and come back to the committee on. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for clarifying that. I'm sure that's no problem at all. I think I'll turn then to Ivan Evans just to respond. A mixed audit, recognised good practice, which is good to hear, strong leadership and ownership of the digital agenda, but clearly there are some key messages for us which you have taken on board, Ivan. Would you like to just condense the management response to those 6 recommendations?
Yeah, certainly, Diolch, Marian. Yes, so I'll take it as read that most people have had a look at the report and they've seen the management comments and the management responses, and I think they're fairly cleanly written, so they're not in themselves that difficult to understand. I think the reflection from Audit Wales that sometimes it's difficult to untangle the internal digital transformation of DHCW as its own organisation from, let's call it, the digital transformation of the NHS as a larger organisation of which we're part. I think that's a very helpful reflection, and it's something that we will take away in order to reflect on. As a board, I'd imagine, building our future as a programme was reported routinely to the board. So we do look internally, but nearly all of our board business is about what we are doing for the NHS as a whole system, rather than what we're doing to re-engineer our own organisation. Which is not to say that that is not important. We're a small organisation relatively compared to the larger NHS organisations, but it's really important that we are practicing what we preach in terms of applying digital to drive productivity, efficiency inside our own organisation. So the recommendations are really welcome, and you can see the responses in that regard. I think the one thing that I'd flag, which is something that I'd like to dig into a little bit deeper through a conversation with Audit Wales, is how to audit agile digital delivery. So we as an organisation have committed to moving towards product-based agile approaches, which stand in contrast to waterfall program delivery. And several of the recommendations are establishing, presumably upfront, clear measures, milestones, outcomes, timetables, targets. That is the language of program delivery across the NHS. That is the Green Book language. That is the language of Audit Wales. I mean, how can you assess whether we're achieving unless we set out in advance what it is we're going to achieve with a timetable, with outcomes, with milestones, with deliverables? But as an organisation, we've committed in certain areas to move away from waterfall, not to abandon waterfall completely, but where agile delivery approaches are more appropriate, to use those alongside waterfall and to choose which model we use. So I'd really welcome, further conversations with Audit Wales about how to audit agile delivery. So the successor, the continuation of, and we did, knock back and forth some of the management responses on this. So the continuation of building our future, because there are still some things that we do need to finish off. We are using 2-week sprints, and we're not setting a firm, definitive, deliverable output sort of target beyond around 3 months. So we're using a now, next, later sort of framing for it. We'll go through the first 3 months, and then we'll take stock of where we are. That we'll set the next 3 months. We'll set the next 3 months. We'll set the next 3 months. And that's quite different to the longer term sequential planned milestones approach that we would use for our IMTP, for example, and for most of our major programs, and particularly large scale complex replacement programs, for example, which are a lot of what we do. So getting that balance right, I think, is something that I'd really like to work with Audit Wales on. Obviously we want to change our approach. Building our future was very much about moving to agile for DHEW itself. But that is modern industry standard practice for digital, and health boards do a lot of digital delivery of their own, and so we want to be a system leader to support them too. And it's really important to me that Audit Wales will be an ally for us, and an advocate, in fact, in that space. It isn't going to help if we're trying to push and lead a shift to agile across the NHS as a whole, but that does not sit comfortably with the traditional waterfall type of assessment and assurance that we have. So we need to find a way, collectively as a whole system, to seek assurance and to seek, sort of an audit view on working in a more agile manner. So hopefully that kind of comes through. That's quite a long. I hope people can kind of read that in the tone of the responses, the management responses that are in the document itself. I just thought I'd unpack that. I think we've got to a comfortable place for all parties, for ourselves and Audit Wales, on the management responses in this report, but this is likely to come up again in other activities, other product development spaces where we're working in an agile manner, and we can't say today what we will be working on this time next year, for example. We can only say what we'll be working on for the next 3 months, and then we'll take stock, and then we'll go again, and we'll go again. So finding a way to bring Audit Wales into that space, I'd really welcome that. So we'll pick up conversations with Andrew and the wider team over the coming months.
Diolch Ivan, that's a helpful challenge, and I'm sure Andrew will want to take that away unless you want to comment now, Andrew. But I think it's something to discuss online.
I'm more than happy to meet. I think it will be a challenge, but we'll try to rise to that challenge. We've got a slightly different approach in Betsy Cadwallader this year, where they've got an elongated program of work, and we're actually doing our work alongside them. So rather than coming after the event and say, right, okay, well, you could have done that better, it's more of us sort of sitting alongside them periodically at touch points, sort of saying, right, okay, well, these are the risks and challenges you're facing. And it may be something sort of like that. I understand, I think it's Audit New Zealand have done something similar with a major program in New Zealand government. So there are approaches. I think it would need to sort of be tailored and be made fit for purpose. But I think absolutely welcome challenge, because we recognise that the things are being done differently. I'd also say that it would be useful if we're having those conversations probably to bring internal audit in that as well, because they do similar work as well. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Andrew. You mentioned, of course, this is a part of a suite of audits that are happening across NHS Wales organisations in terms of digital transformation. When are we likely to see a condensed collective view of the digital transformation across Wales and bringing the key conclusions and messages together?
So that's something we're working on at the moment. I would expect it to be in the next 2 to 3 months. I don't know the absolute date, so I can't bring that to you. But I do know it is being collated at the moment. It will probably be quite a short summary. and it will represent obviously a picture of what's happening. Although it's all Wales, it will be at what's happening within bodies rather than the national sort of strategic picture.
Diolch, Andrew, and obviously there is the wider piece of work that will be going on later this year within internal audit also, which will feed into this agenda. Ivan.
Yeah, I'll just share some learning maybe from a couple of exercises we've done. One which was on, you'll see where I'm going in a second, Andrew. One which was on digital maturity across the NHS in Wales, and a second on, it was an exercise after Betsy Cadwaladr had done an assessment of their options, a sort of a strategic options appraisal for their future roadmap for an electronic health record. There was a piece of work that was done that considered whether Betsy's conclusions were generalizable to the other organizations. And the short story on that one is if you seek to apply those principles to each organization as an individual organization, then broadly, yes, generalizable, because a health board is like a health board. But if you sought to apply that to the whole of the NHS Wales system, you'd come out with different conclusions, because the NHS as a whole in Wales is not the same as the sum of the parts of each individual health board. So, and similarly on digital maturity. So each organization had its own digital maturity score, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the maturity of the whole system is the same as the maturity of each individual organization. So I think what is really interesting is what is the sum of the parts, and is that different to the parts? If so in bringing the review of all the digital transformation assessments of all of the organizations together, there's one approach which would be a summary of each of those on its own merit, but then there's a separate view, I suppose, which is, well, what does the whole thing together say to us, which might be something which is different to just a layering of what's in each organization. I'm not sure whether I'm expressing myself that clearly here, but that, so we as a national organization, and I know, Public Health Wales, HEIW, and other national organizations would share this sort of general view, is that the sum of the parts is sometimes different in character and might lead you to different conclusions and reflections. And the reason I'm sort of flagging that is those two sort of examples there, where if you look at it as a whole system, it's slightly different to each of them individually, but also because our escalation last year was 4 major collaborative programs. The collaborative programs are the ones that we find hardest to deliver, because it's almost like an exponential complexity challenge. You don't just add the challenge of each one; it kind of multiplies. So finding a way to draw that out from all the work. There's a lot of work in the digital transformation reports. Finding a way to draw that out, I think we would really value that. And I think that might be something which would be very, very useful for the system as a whole to reflect. And just to say, the digital directors also are looking at all the reports as they come out. I know they're being published on your website, so they also would be looking to do a sort of a stock take of what does the whole lot together say to us.
Diolch, Ivan, and I'm aware as well that the audit chairs network across Wales are also keen to take a look at this when all the audits are complete. Chris?
Thank you. And it was just a quick question, probably builds on Ivan's point, actually. Quick question for Andrew, because I know there was a lot of work, and from the reports that have come out for each health board, so some really helpful information in there about the investment that's been made and the planned investment that health boards have in digital. So I was actually wondering, again, as part of pulling together that national view, whether you'd considered maybe using a benchmark or other to assess actually whether that investment that is planned across Wales is the investment that would be required to achieve digital transformation.
That's a very good challenge, Chris. So benchmarking, and are you using the information to benchmark whether we are across NHS Wales making the required investment in digital transformation? Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I'll take it back to the team preparing it. It would be possible, as far as I'm aware, to be able to bring together the cost. Benchmarking might be somewhat more difficult depending on who we can compare and contrast with, because they may be set up in a different way. I don't know, we'd have to consider how reliable that exercise might be. And I think you probably already know the answer in terms of, are you investing enough in digital when you look at some of the sort of other sectors and the amount they're spending. And I can't remember the review, but it was done on, I think it was undertaken in 2002, 2004, and it identified significant shortfalls in digital investment in Wales, and I don't think positions has really changed. So I think you probably already know the answer. We might be able to sort of put some numbers together to sort of say this is where it compares, but I think benchmarking might be a little bit problematic as it currently stands, but we'll take it back.
Thank you, Andrew. And holding that
Super,
mirror,
thank you.
I think, is always very, very useful. So anything that can be done, I'm sure, would be very, very welcome. Diolch yn fawr. Sam Morgan.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So my question is about the aggregation of the information as well, particularly through the lens of the digital profession. And again, what is that data telling us? We are leading on a piece of work on behalf of the NHS in Wales to look at the digital profession and to bring about a combined approach to how we do that on a Once for Wales basis. So anything that your individual audits are showing around the digital workforce across Wales and the investment that's being made into them as well, that would be really helpful as part of the work that we're doing as an organisation.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Obviously, as well as sort of doing work across Wales, there's a particular emphasis on HEIW and their involvement in the capability framework, competency framework. And we have provided some challenge already to them in terms of some of the take up, because we know that take up has been low in a lot of organisations. And there's reasons for that, and there's a question to say, that might have been the right tool at the right time, right point in time, but actually does Wales need something else? Because it sort of, I think, addresses some quite basic requirements, but that's not suitable for all, and there are different needs. So there's probably something about saying what does Wales need now? But yeah, certainly we can bring together some messages back for HEIW, but I think they're aware of that as well.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to bring this to a close. Sam, unless you have anything you wanted to add?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
That's fine. Thank you. A very helpful audit report as ever, Andrew. Recognising good practice, but it is a mixed picture, and it's pleasing to note that managements have completed the majority of the actions before our meeting today. So an interesting discussion as well, and a number of key points which I'm grateful to you for agreeing to take away, and I'm sure we'll be coming back to those points offline for sure. Diolch yn fawr. So we are asked to receive for assurance the digital transformation report, which I'm sure we're happy to do so. In the suite, we've got the remit letter delivery report and the audit inquiries letter, which is literally being brought to us formally for recording. Andrew, anything you'd like to say about the remit letter delivery report?
I probably won't go into the same level of detail as I did on the last. Just hope that the remit letter report, I'm hoping, didn't really provide any surprises in it. I think it sort of reflects the probable complexity that was faced by the organisation in the very first year, with the extent of requirements and the short notice, which brought particular challenges. So we've tried to recognise that in the report. We've identified that the organisation did a good job of bringing together those requirements into plans, which I think has been a positive and logical approach. In terms of funding, we've highlighted that the 25-26 funding approach for delivery seemed to be proportionate, but we obviously know this year is a lot more challenging. And I don't know whether the uncertainty around what was the DPIF funding have been sorted, but obviously it brings a different challenge this year. So we have highlighted that basically there is really a need to work together with Welsh Government to try to get the an understanding of the remit letter requirements a bit earlier. I think it'll make it easier for planning. When we look at monitoring, the information tends to indicate that there's a lot of the delivery is towards the end of the financial year, and I think if you could start planning earlier, it might sort of smooth that, so there's more delivery sort of early in the year and less year-end pressure. But we did find it, if we could say anything, we did find it very difficult to understand whether the actual remit letter requirements were delivered in full. And because you've integrated it into your wider plans, it's then hard at the end of the process to say, right, okay, well, this is the Welsh Government requirement on us. How have we delivered as an organisation against that? And we found it very difficult to be able to assess that. So although we could see, the requirements integrated into IMTP and IMTP actions deliverable, it's hard to see the complete picture around delivery against remit letter requirements. And I don't know whether it's a requirement as part of escalation intervention to demonstrate that you've delivered those remit letter requirements. But if it is, it's certainly something the organisation needs to be thinking about, to say, right, okay, how can we sort of separate that back out again and say very clearly, this is what you asked us to do, and this is how we delivered against it.
Thank you, Andrew. I don't know who, Ivan, perhaps you can come in and clarify the question on the DPIF funding, the Digital Priorities Investment Fund priorities. As Andrew noted, there was a lack of clarity when this audit was being written up. Have we any change in position from that audit report?
We do have an outcome from the DPIF pause and review about 10 days ago. So I think it was a week ago, last Friday, that we received notification from Welsh Government of the outcome of that. So there are reductions to a number of programmes. Some of the submissions that we were invited to put in have not been supported. So we're working through that process. We're responding to Welsh Government in order to be able to confirm the draft funding letters that we've received for those, and where we had paused programs, we're restarting those programs. We'll be reviewing those this week at our internal management board, and there are program boards coming up over the next 2 to 3 weeks, where obviously the program board governance will also kick in to review the delivery plans for those. I'll just pause. I want to just offer some reflections maybe on the remit letter process as a whole, but I'll see if Chris wants to come in on the finance and the DPIF first, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Chris Morton. Please.
Yeah, thanks, Ivan. No, I just my point was actually going to be again to Andrew. I think this report is helpful. Actually, I actually think it sets out quite clearly how DHCWs needed to be quite agile in responding to changing sets of Welsh Government requirements, because the approach year on year has changed, and this year has changed again significantly from having more kind of delegated authority to via budgets last year to this year being very much grant-based funding and a move to kind of more conditional milestones. So that really means that we as an organisation, both the finance team and working with the programmes team, have to respond quite quickly to make sure we've got the appropriate controls and measures in place to manage that. I also think it highlights some of the delivery challenges that we face with regards to having ambiguity and uncertainty over funding arrangements. And I think, again, in response to that, that's something where, again, I've already asked the team here to just try and be a bit clearer in terms of the narrative and responses as to actually how the funding position is impacting delivery. Because again, I certainly felt in Q1 this year we've kind of had to, ramp. We've had to put in place measures where we can sustain delivery, but at a much a reduced rate in comparison to then once we've got our funding confirmed, which we had probably a week ago, then we now have to ramp back up delivery, which is quite challenging for the teams. So again, I just felt that the report was helpful in summarising some of those issues. Thanks.
Diolch, Chris. Thank you for that. Ivan.
Yeah, diolch. So I think the report was helpful, and you can see from the management response how we're taking the very useful recommendations on board, particularly to engage earlier with Welsh Government. If you permit me some brief sort of general reflection. So I've been involved with remit letters on both the receiving end and the issuing end for almost 20 years as a board member of an arm's length body, as a director of an arm's length body, and as a sponsoring official in Welsh Government, issuing remit letters to sponsored bodies and to arm's length bodies in the Economy Department and in the Health Department. And usually, and the NHS context, I think, is much more complicated than it ordinarily is for arm's length bodies. Usually, the remit letter is the only defining document. And that is, if you issue a remit letter to an arm's length body, then that is the government mandate, I suppose, right, or the government direction to that body. Usually, they've been on one-year terms. For a while in the late 2010s, there was, and early 2020s, there was a desire to get to full term of government remit letters, and some organisations were receiving term of government remit letters to provide that kind of forward stability. So I think government has adapted and flexed the remit letter process quite a lot. It's new for us, and I think HAW received one and Public Health Wales received one. It's relatively new in their health context. And I think the challenge that we're facing is that there's a lot of other statutory directive framework in the health context. So we have an IMTP framework, we have technical guidance for the IMTP framework, we have ministerial priorities that are issued, we have Welsh Health circulars that are issued, and we have national transformation programs that also kind of convey a set of prioritization. The IMTP process is a statutory process, and therefore, the framework which we're managed through is not just the remit letter. It is all of those things, and we have to field all of those things and show how they all line up with each other, and they don't all line up with each other. There's sometimes a kind of a Swiss cheese effect in that there are some things that are in the remit letter but not in other documents, but there are other things that are in other documents that are not in the remit letter. Nothing is perfectly aligned. So I'm actually really proud of the way that the organisation has worked, and the planning team particularly has worked with the Welsh Government officials in the digital team in the Health Department to try to reconcile all of those things into a sensible, coherent whole that we can assure ourselves that the government is comfortable with and that we are comfortable with, and it's something that we can manage our delivery against. It is still, though, I think, bedding in, as Chris said. This year's remit letter was quite different to the previous year's remit letter. At the last minute, what is now called DPIF funding, which last year was called National Transformation Funding, I think, was removed, but the commitments were still in the remit letter. But I think we fielded that this year much more quickly. It took us about 3 months to get through last year. It took us about a month to get through this year. Now, ideally, looking ahead into next year, through the first recommendation, we'll engage earlier with Welsh Government, and we will achieve a sort of a remit letter that we've seen before Christmas, and then we can fold that into our IMTP planning, and we can have an earlier cross-check against the IMTP framework and the technical guidance, because there's a whole section on digital in the technical guidance for the IMTP framework advice. If we can do that, then it'll be 0 days next year, because the IMTP will be aligned to the remit letter from the beginning. And I think that's a shared ambition. I know that's where the government officials team want to get to, but they have to deal with their own timetables and with the traffic that they have inside the department. So it's a really helpful recommendation. It's really good to have an independent view on the process. I think that given the context, it is an inherently complex arrangement, more so than other arm's length bodies that don't have the IMTP framework and the other statutory frameworks to operate to. I'm very pleased with the way that the teams have responded constructively and engaged positively with Welsh Government over the last 2 cycles, and we'll continue to work with Welsh Government and hopefully bring an agreed and issued remit letter up front. Pre-Christmas would be ideal, so that it comes out at the same time as the IMTP framework and the IMTP technical guidance. And then other health organisations also ideally can see what's in our remit letter, because clearly some of what is in our remit letter impacts upon other organisations when it speaks to collaborative programmes, for example. So very grateful, and we'll continue to work with Welsh Government to try to bed down the whole remit letter process and how that sits alongside IMTPs.
Diolch yn fawr, Ifan. Very helpful observations there. I'll turn now to our Board Secretary, Chris Darling.
Diolch, Marion. Yeah, and a really helpful report. Thank you, Andrew. My reflection is, I think, similar to what's been said, but I think as an organisation, as a board, we need to consider next year the extent to which we include, or how much we include over and above the remit letter in our IMTP. I think this report perhaps challenges us on that. The statutory responsibility on us is to produce an IMTP that meets the requirements of the remit letter, not necessarily do more. Now, you could argue if there's things in the IMTP planning framework that's not in the remit letter, it's inherent on us to include that. But this year, we've also had feedback on our IMTP that we've put too much in. How do we strip it back? How do we prioritise? So I think there's just something for us to reflect on, and we've got time. And if we engage with government earlier in the process, I think the iterative discussion around that can happen earlier as well.
Thank you, Chris. That's a really good point. I just wonder, in terms of tracking, the delivery of remit letter priorities, whether there is a role for the audit committee, and perhaps we can discuss how best to take that forward, Chris, offline. We'll take that as an action. Diolch yn fawr. So unless there are any other observations, thank you, Ivan, thank you, Andrew, for what is a very helpful report, which underlines, I guess, the consistent need for agility, as we've heard, within DHCW, and Ivan has outlined very clearly, I think, the response and the accepted recommendations, and it's a very helpful report in order to take us forward. But it is complex, and aligning the IMTP with the remit letter, I think the points made by Chris is it was well made, and something we will be reflecting on over the coming months. Diolch yn fawr, Andrew. So we are being asked to receive the remit letter delivery report and the audit inquiries for assurance, which we are happy to do so. Diolch yn fawr iawn. We'll move on then to agenda item 4.4, which is the audit action log. And I'll now turn to Laura Tolley to update the committee on the current status of the audit action log, which we are being asked to note and approve the requests made in the report. Laura.
Diolch yn fawr, Marianne. So committee members will be familiar with this report, which provides an update on audit recommendations, including those completed during the reporting period, those on track and those overdue, where we're requesting target dates extensions. So since the last committee meeting, 3 reports and associated actions have been added. They were for sustainable funding, cybersecurity and service continuity planning. That introduced 10 new actions onto the tracker, so it contains now a total of 56. There has been good progress since the last update, so 34 have been completed in the period, and then 17 are on track and are continuing to be monitored through the corporate governance team and relevant leads. But I would like to draw committee members' attention to section 4.5 of the report, and that lists out 5 actions that we're requesting an action, an extension to the original target date. One of those actions is from the Structured Assessment 2025 report, and then the 4 remaining actions are from the Staff Culture Wellbeing Audit Report. So both Chris Darling and Sam Morgan are here if there are any questions or queries relating to the extensions requested themselves. So if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll just pause for a moment to see if there's any questions to lead officers before we conclude. Diolch.
Diolch, Laura. Any questions, colleagues? No, I can't see any, Laura, so I'll invite you to continue.
Alistair's just popped his hand up, Marion, so I'll hand to Alistair. Diolch.
Thank you, Laura. And really, it's just to ask, and I support the need to really delay if we're not going to achieve those dates. I think it's inevitable we need to. I just wanted to ask, did we set unreasonable expectations on when we would deliver? Because delivery is so much part of the focus that we need to really tighten up on. In the previous couple of reports, I've I think added to that particular emphasis if we needed it. So I'm just trying to understand if that is partly due to our expectation of being able to complete something that was less realistic than perhaps we should have been. And if so, you know, I do really support the idea of being realistic and focused in what we do. Thanks.
Yeah, diolch,
Thank you,
Alistair.
Alistair.
Oh, sorry, Marianne. Yeah, diolch for that. It's a helpful challenge, and I think it's one that internally we've worked really closely with Steve Cheney and the team around really challenging the responses that the wider leads across the organisation send. So we'll sort of do that check and challenge internally. Do you think that you can achieve it within the set timeframe? So we do have a process around that. I do think naturally people think, you know, you assume, don't you, that you actually things will be a little bit quicker to get done, and then the reality of it is a little bit different. But for these ones in particular, I'll hand over to Chris and Sam, but just to provide the assurance that that is an area of focus for us as a team, to provide that check and challenge along with internal audit and external audit colleagues. Yeah.
Thanks, Laura. So perhaps we'll turn to Chris Darling first and then bring in Sam on the culture. Diolch, Chris.
Diolch, Marion. Yeah, just in terms of the performance report. So we are producing it in shadow form this month. We've had a couple of exec sessions to do the iterations. In answer to your question, Alistair, I think probably yes, we have been a bit ambitious with this one. I've asked the team to get some external review and input into some of the changes that have been made as well. So I'm partly to blame for that. We've iterated internally. I want to get some external verification that some of the changes we've made are kind of industry best practice. But I think the point's well made around being realistic around timeframes.
Yeah, if
Thanks,
I may,
Chris,
just
for that explanation. Yeah.
If I may possibly, Marion, just on that, come back on this. It's not at all to suggest fault or blame. It's really just recognizing that there might be, just as Laura is indicating, it's probably culturally in all of us as professionals, we want to get things done, and we're going to push ourselves to get things done. And it's just to recognize that actually we probably don't get credit for under delivery against things. We probably attract more criticism than credit, and it might be that counterintuitive, but possibly something that we should regularly just talk about. Thanks on that.
Thank you, Alistair, and thanks for raising that point. Sam Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alistair. I think it's a really good point, and I think we are overly ambitious on occasions because we want to really stretch in terms of goals and achievements. I think one of the learnings for me particularly is that what might feel achievable at the point in time where you set that time limit, what you're not anticipating is everything else that comes in after that. And I think we need to be reflective of that and build in some time to just cope with the unanticipated events that happen as well.
Diolch, Sam.
Thank you.
So at that point, I think let's turn back to Laura then to complete the report.
Diolch yn fawr. So yeah, all we're asking now is the committee to note the overall tracker position and then approve the extensions set out in the report.
Diolch, Laura, which I'm sure we are happy to do so. It seems a logical step forward at this point. Can I just check whether we're all happy with to approve that those 5 requests for extensions? I think we are. Thank you very much. Marilyn, do you have your hand up? Marilyn, I thought I saw a hand up, but I think it's gone down. So thank you. It seems we are happy to approve those extensions. And diolch, Laura, for taking us through report. We'll move on then to agenda item 4.5, which is the local counter fraud update. And it's my pleasure now to invite Henry Bales of the Cardiff and Vale Counter Fraud Service to present the progress report along with the local counter fraud annual report, which we're pleased to receive. Henry, croeso.
Hey, thank you, Chair. I'll just go through it quickly. The progress report is the same layout that we've used before. We continue to be part of the corporate inductions, but obviously those are reducing at the moment, moving forwards, but we've continued with those. There is a new newsletter out, if everyone could please take a look when you get a chance. Hopefully it's got some useful information in there. There's been one fraud prevention notice in the period, which has been reviewed and assessed in relation to the organisation, with no actions needed to take, no issues identified, but information shared for help and use. And work is underway in relation to our fraud risk profile, as we're calling it, to move all of our previously done risks onto a new government counter fraud profession template, which is a hefty template to get things moved across onto, and also to do some work to do kind of overarching risk reviews on a large number of risks. So we're doing that across the 5 organisations that my team covers. So we're making some efficiencies in where we can share and do things there, but it is a bigger piece of work that we'll update on as we move forward. There have been no new allegations or investigations started in this period. One remains open, an investigation by ourselves. One is open and under investigation by the National Team Counter Fraud Service Wales. And we did close one investigation in the period where no fraud was found in relation to a working elsewhere during contracted time. I just wanted to say with those sort of things, we have seen a few of these working elsewhere during contracted time cases, which you'll see from the annual report as we move on to. It's a 50-50 how to take these sort of things, in terms of we haven't proven a fraud there, but at the same time we haven't proven that there wasn't some concerns raised. So obviously concerns were raised. That's how it's come to come under investigation. And I think just in general, the whole working elsewhere in contracted time, dual working is a real issue. So although we haven't found a fraud, provable fraud in this case, it is still an ongoing issue that we're facing as an organisation that we'll continue to keep an eye on. So if there's any questions on the progress report before we cover the annual report, happy to take those.
Thank you, Henry. And I just echo that the newsletter is a really helpful document and well worth dipping into. And I think it's been a really positive development over the last year. So thank you for that. Laura.
Diolch, Marion, and diolch, Henry, as well. It was just around, that you highlight, and you'll see it in the annual report as well, that secondary employment that we're seeing more and more of. And I know you and I have had conversations about that as well. So that we are doing a piece of work internally with people in OD around how we strengthen that, capturing it, not just on our declaration of interest, in sort of really focusing on that area in terms of how we're reporting it, how we're monitoring it, and taking a bit more of a proactive approach to that. So it'd be probably worth bringing that to a future committee meeting, just for assurance, really, from your perspective in response to the trends that we're seeing from counter fraud. Diolch.
Thank you, Laura. And that was one of the points that struck me as well whilst looking at the annual report. It's clearly something that is evolving and an increasing issue across not just ourselves, but other organisations, not only across NHS Wales, but beyond as well. So unless there are any questions or observations, we will note the progress report. And I will ask you now then to turn to the annual counter fraud report. Henry, diolch.
Thank you, Chair. So the annual report is covering all the work that was done in the last financial year, and hopefully trying to set out and show some of those trends that we've got further down in the report with some of the graphs. So to start with, we have done the Government Functional Standard Counter Fraud Return, which we do every year. So that is a self-assessment against the Government Counter Fraud Functional Standard number 13 on counter fraud. So there are 12 areas that we assess. Those are assessed as green for the organisation across all of those, and that report is reviewed by the Audit Committee Chair and the Interim Exec Director of Finance, and it was submitted in time prior to the closure date to the Counter Fraud Authority. I lost my words there, sorry. So that was done in time, and as I say, green in all those areas, which is positive. So we set out there the resources that we planned and used in the year. It was 85 days planned, 85 days used. and the cost of the organisation is set out there, just over £27,000. During the year, we had 20 new referrals and 5 were promoted to investigation, and we've obviously carried over the one internally into the next financial year. There was a just under £115,000 fraud prevention figure, which related and was reported earlier on in the year to some cyber enabled mandate frauds that were going around to GP practices throughout the year. And obviously one investigation remains open with the national team. Fraud awareness is very high for the organisation. The mandated e-learning is over 98%, and we do continue to be part of the corporate inductions as we move forward. So jump into the graphs. You will see that we have had a dip in the number of attendances at awareness sessions. So we were just over 330 in 23-24, and that's dropped down to just below 150 and then 120 this year, which is as expected. We are focusing on the mandated e-learning, so people are attending that as opposed to sessions put on by ourselves. We do continue to be part of the corporate inductions, but that does vary and fluctuate with how many sessions are held. And obviously with recruitment levels for the organisation. So I will expect that to drop slightly more going forward. So I believe the next 2 aren't going ahead, but we will be at every session for anyone new who does come into the organisation as we move forward. Referrals and investigations are still increasing, and I think part of that is just that we've had better awareness and more people aware of things and reporting things. But I would say that possibly the working elsewhere whilst dual employment is probably an actual increase in terms of frauds that are happening, rather than just picking up on more things. I think we are seeing an actual increase in those sort of referrals and frauds. So we obviously, the work is ongoing within the organisation, and hopefully see how that tracks moving forwards and keep a close eye on that. And
Henry, could you?
Oh, sorry, yes.
I was just thinking it'd be helpful perhaps just to understand what sort of work is ongoing to try and combat that rise. Perhaps you could just explain what that entails.
So obviously there's a work law set out internally within the organisation for how that is managed with declarations and interests. And we are hoping to, within agreement of people services and everyone involved, trying to find a way that we can combat things earlier. So when they come to us, there's lots of intricacies and of how we try and investigate and prove dual working, with especially the roles being so remote and difficult to track. So in trying to create some form of notice or advice document that we can use to educate people a bit better, because not always do people realize that they're doing something wrong. They think, oh, I can do it, and or I'm able to do it. So we're going to try and roll that kind of notice piece out, and obviously the organisation is also out is doing those things internally about increasing declarations and how we can effectively track people and what they're doing more efficiently.
Thank you. Thanks.
And I've set out for the fraud awareness, obviously the comparisons across all of Wales, which is very pleasing to see DHCW right at the top there at 98%, and I'm sure we'll continue to be at that level as we move forward. But that's really good to see. Nothing else to say on that one. And then moving down, we've got the referral types and broken it down into 2 tables. So the first table is DHCW's own referrals, and internally what we have there, which we can see that the main changes being the working elsewhere in contracted time is going from 2 to 5 within the past year, which is a larger increase than we'd like to see in essence. And when we move on to the second table, we can see that it's kind of a pattern that's reflected across. These are the 5 organisations that my team covers, because the data is more readily available to me. But we see the working elsewhere in contracted time there has gone from 4 to 13. So some of that is DHCW's rise, but also you can see that there's definitely some others from other organisations in the rise there, and also working elsewhere while sick has doubled across those in the past year. So we're definitely seeing those sort of sickness and working elsewhere, and also there has been a rise in recruitment frauds, which hasn't necessarily impacted DHCW yet, but is definitely a trend that we're seeing in relation to making sure that references and qualifications are accurate in referrals. And yeah, that's hopefully the end of the report. The only other thing I think to mention that did happen in the last year is that we did update the counter fraud policy in response to the changes in legislation for the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act. So that was gone through as well.
Thank you, Henry, for noting that. It's a very pleasing report, very clear in terms of the trend changes in the types of referrals that we are dealing with. I'll open it out for questions or comments, and I can see Alistair's hand up. Alistair.
Thank you, Marianne, and Henry, thanks for the report. Yeah, there's some positives there in terms of the latest report. I'm also looking at the full year that you helpfully attached, and it's your comment on dual employment as I think it's probably a relatively new phenomenon for large organizations to contend with, particularly in the public sector, I think. Have we prosecuted where we have found people to have been breaking their contract and actually fraudulently employed in other work during their contracted hours?
So we as a team haven't had a full prosecution as of yet. Obviously, there are investigations that continue underway. There have been prosecutions elsewhere in the country. I believe there's one down in London way where these things have gone through all the way to court, and people have been convicted of these offences. So it is something that we will progress and follow through with where we can.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? And
well,
I can see
partially, Marianne, but I just wonder why we haven't prosecuted, Henry. Are we a soft touch for people? Is there not a greater risk of further instances if we are seen in that way?
So it's not that we have chosen not to prosecute anybody or done that, in that we will obviously use the full extent that we have to prosecute anybody where we can do that. There are complexities and difficulties that come with proving offences to the criminal standard, and sometimes it may be only achievable to a disciplinary standard of balance of probabilities as opposed to beyond all reasonable doubt, and the certainty level that you have to reach for criminal prosecutions. So I appreciate that it is nice to see those criminal convictions that we do when we can, and please be assured that where we can, we will achieve those.
And there are examples where other organisations or employers are involved, and the whole process can be more complex as it affects not just ourselves but other organisations as well in the way these things are taken forward. Chris, perhaps you'd like to come in. Chris Morton.
I was just going to make a point, actually, just for the committee to note. So I'd met with Cheryl Hill, who's the new head of NHS Counter Fraud Services for Wales. And just again, as part of that discussion, understanding the strategic direction for counter fraud services to develop more prevention focused and intelligence led solutions that kind of builds on the local arrangements. And again, thanks to Henry for all the work that continues to happen at the local level. I think reflection coming out of that conversation was, again, the key role that DHCW has to play in this, actually, because I think if you look at some of the key risks, there's a clear crossover with the cybersecurity and resilience work that we undertake. The dual roles rise is very closely linked to people being able to work remotely now. So again, that increases the threat and the risk. And of course, then there's other wider threats of cybersecurity concerns, including phishing and those aspects as well. So again, I just offered my support to Cheryl in terms of our role in helping to prevent, as far as possible, some of those wider fraud cases. So just to note that, and thanks to Henry.
Thank you, Chris, for that observation. I'll turn now to Chris Darling.
Diolch, Marian. Yeah, it was a similar point, actually. It was just, we're a highly virtual organisation, aren't we? Most of the staff work at home majority of the week. So it is an area that I think is evolving both for us and globally. So we're seeing trends. I was just going to say, I think the work Laura and I think Lucy from Sam Morgan's team are doing on this is really helpful. Terminology is important. So Laura talked about standards of behaviour policy and what you can and can't do. That doesn't always necessarily infer fraud. So I think how we frame this is important, and the severity, potential severity, is important. And as Alistair said, if there are cases, using cases to bring it to life so people understand how serious this can be and how easily it can happen. But I know that work's progressing. I'm grateful for the work that has happened.
Thank you, Chris, for those comments. And thank you again on behalf of the committee, Henry, for all the work that you're doing in the counter-fraud area. It's very helpful indeed. And as we note the update and the annual report, just to conclude by saying how pleasing it is to see the high compliance of our awareness in terms of the counter-fraud e-learning, top in Wales at 98%. And thank you, colleagues, for leading on that work. It's good to see such a positive result. Diolch yn fawr. So that brings us nicely to the end of part 4. So it is 10:47 according to my clock here. We'll return at 11 o'clock then for the second part of today's agenda. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Henry, again, and colleagues for your input in that first half of today's committee. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for joining us for the second half of the Audit and Assurance Committee here at Digital Healthcare Wales. Croeso nôl, and we are turning now to part 5, which include the governance reports. And we'll start with agenda item 5.1, which is the Quality and Regulatory Compliance Report, including the annual quality report. So it's my pleasure now to invite Alexander Lawrence, who is the Quality Management Systems Manager, to present the Quality and Regulatory Report and the enclosed annual quality report, which we are being asked to note and approve.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. Yes, so the Quality and Regulatory Q1 report for this year, our quality remains strong and strengthening performance. We had one external ISO audit, and that's in the 27001 cybersecurity surveillance audit. Very successful. We had 2 minor non-compliances and 3 opportunities for improvement. A very good result considering the complexity of the standard. Quality improvement remains strong within the organisation. We have 5-minute improvement training, and we've trained almost 240 colleagues throughout the organisation. I'm showing a 90% satisfaction rate with the training, and we've had 64 improvements submitted, a reasonable number, I think. We've introduced Kaizen activities throughout the organisation, so continued improvement. Areas we've covered are the on-call rotas, emergency planning, and the data standards team. Internal performance that we monitor, so documentation management within the EQMS Cyfarfod remains strong, 92% within review date, and non-compliances as well are also 92% within target of completion date. Regulatory focus, medical device regulations and readiness, and we're putting through the Manchester triage system and getting the product files in preparation to submission to the MHRA. We're targeting to undertake that this month, and then we use that as a model run, if you like, streamline the processes around the regulation and management of medical devices in the organisation. Looking forward then to the next quarter, we have a ISO 20000 service management recertification audit. We have to submit the quality management system organisation development plan to P&I by the end of this month, so 31st of July. And what I'm personally working on is the duty of quality always on reporting, being driven by team's objectives captured within quality plans. So that's an update on the past quarter. Questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lawrence. Are there any questions for Lawrence on the first quarter report? Alistair.
Yes, thanks, Chair, and thanks indeed, Alex, for the report. I'm very interested in the improvement work that you described and the way you're going about it. There's lots there that looks really encouraging in terms of engagement of staff. Without getting lost in what I'm sure is quite a lot of detail, are we also encouraging people to eliminate work that is not productive, eliminate tasks and processes that could be made more straightforward from the point of view of delivery, not simply coming up with ideas about new ways of doing things? I just wondered if we're encouraging that work in the Kaizen activities that you described.
Yes, thank you, Alistair, for the question. Yeah, so Kaizen continual improvement is all about mapping the processes of a given functionalities, I suppose. You map those out, and then the streamlining would happen where you eliminate any of the non-required activities, then therefore improving the process, reducing the time spent on that as well. And then you can do a cost benefit analysis and things like that, and then to see the time saved and things like that, to see how much you're actually saving in time and obviously money and things like that in process. So yes, that's part of the continual improvement Kaizen exercise as a whole, really, is the streamline those things. Yes.
Thanks, Alex. That's really helpful.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. And it's extremely good to see how DHCW is continuing to improve within the quality performance. So unless there are any other observations, should we turn to the annual quality report then? Lawrence, again, over to you.
Marianne. Yes, so the annual quality report for the last fiscal year, so April 25 to March 26. This was important to note that the report has been submitted in a draft format to the committee as well, prior to being published, and graphically formatted and things. So the quality report captures the objectives and achievements met by the quality team last year. It also captures achievements from across the organisation, not everything, but a selected amount of achievements. We then map those to the domains and enablers of the duty of quality. We're trying to ensure that quality is embedded throughout the organisation and it's not treated as a standalone process. Some key achievements that were captured in the report: the NHS Wales app has over 7,000 registered patients. We've 3.4 million repeated prescriptions via the app, with an estimated 185,000 hours saved within GP practices and admin functions, which is amazing. We've clearly trained over 100 digital inclusion champions to the organisation, improving digital skills. And one of the achievements from the quality team, we published our quality framework, supporting quality design by design, and with the requirement then of the quality plans where the teams throughout the organisation to submit. We've maintained our major ISO and BS certifications. We have many of those, and we've completed or supported with a UCAS inspection and the LIMS 2.0 system as well. As previously mentioned, quality improvement activities have grown last year with finding improvement training, QI training, quality improvement training, and those Kaizen activities. Looking ahead, so we have to formalise the quality management system, which is being driven by P&I, Performance and Improvement Wales. As I mentioned earlier, we have to submit our position at the end of this month. The quality plans, we're aiming to get a reasonable 80% of those approved by the end of the financial year, with each of those approved plans also having at least one quality improvement activity undertaken against the objectives covered. We've established the quality improvement group, so the document in the terms of reference and things for the group and the functionalities, and I'm personally working on the always on report currently as well, capturing on mapping against the DP quality from the quality plans, and I'm hoping to get that published at the end of the quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you for what is an excellent report, very comprehensive, which details very clearly the step change that we've been through as an organisation since the Duty of Quality Act came into being in April 23. So I will open it out now for comments and observations. Laura, first of all, Laura Tolley.
Diolch Marian, diolch Alex. And I just wanted to comment on the work that the quality team are doing around what matters to you and how that is having such a positive effect across the organisation and improving staff morale. And I think it really does align with our putting people first principle. So it'd be really good to see how, I know the annual quality report says there's an implementation plan is under consideration for that, but I think that would be really useful to see what that looks like across the organisation. You know, we've done one recently and it's made our team a lot more effective in the way that we work, and has definitely had that morale boost, which is what the aim of the programme was. So a great job by Alex and the team, and keen to see that spread across the organisation. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Laura. Thank you. And Chris Darling, you're next.
Diolch, Marian. Yeah, thanks, Alex. I was just wondering, in terms of the annual report, the quality team's KPIs, what status are they at? What will they kind of look like, and how will they drive improvement?
So currently we're, our sort of core KPIs we report on a monthly basis of the document position, non-compliance, like passport training. All very healthy at the moment. The sort of rationale behind it is, so if you've got, so documentation wise, if you've got outlined processes of good quality, then you should have a good quality result at the end, provided that we've followed said processes. Non-compliances then, or captured findings, obviously are all improvement mechanisms, from internal and external audit, service improvements, suggestions, and things like that. So obviously a KPI around those to ensure they've been delivered on time is important. And then iPassport, a KPI around that helps support colleagues or users with their documentation management and non-compliance management. So that's where we report on the KPI around the system. And then moving forward, some of our objectives we're capturing this year and things, the quality plans are going to be mapping all of the organisation's BAU activities with KPIs. And obviously it's going to be forming part of the always on reporting and to meet that requirement of particular quality. So we're ensuring quality is embedded throughout the organisation, driven up capturing from those quality plans.
Diolch, Lawrence. Thank you. And finally, I'll turn to Sam Morgan.
Thank you, Alex. Really helpful to hear all of that. So I wonder whether there's something for us to think about in terms of triangulating the work that's going on here and other work across the organisation. So one of our risks is workload during escalation and the amount of pressure that puts on our staff. So it would be really good to understand and quantify that work in light of escalation to ensure that we are working on the right things at the right time and prioritising that. How we do that is something maybe we can pick up offline and have a chat through.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion. We are later on in this meeting considering the Welsh language report, and we would like to think that the Welsh language is embedded right across the organisation. So I think it would be helpful for the committee as well in the next iteration of this report to see how we are embedding quality within the Welsh language so that it's not just a standalone report coming to this committee, that we properly reflect our duty of quality in terms of the Welsh language as well. So perhaps you could take that away if that's possible.
Okay, sure.
Great. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. Will you please thank you and your colleagues for the huge amount of work that's gone into developing this report and the support that you've given the organisation throughout the year in embedding the duty of quality, which is an important statutory requirement for us. So diolch yn fawr iawn. We then are happy to approve the annual quality report, which is before the committee. Diolch yn fawr, Alex. Let's move on then to agenda item 5.2, and we have a suite of reports coming through in terms of finance and procurement. So I'm going to hand over to Chris Morton, and perhaps you can introduce your colleagues as and when we progress through the 5 separate reports before us. Chris, diolch yn fawr. And Chris is our interim Chief Finance Officer. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Marianne. Yeah, so I'll just take each of these in turn. And again, appreciate there's a number of papers here, so we'll step through some of these relatively swiftly as well. So the first item is the high value purchase orders report. So this reports to the committee that during the period 24th of March to the 24th of June, there were 7 high value orders of more than 750k. The transactions have been reviewed through the established governance processes and are included within the cumulative position presented to the committee as well. So it just provides some transparency over the material expenditure within our procurement activity. So the committee's asked to note the high value orders report, but happy to take any questions on that. I'll just pause there.
Thank you. And are there any questions on the high value purchase order and cumulative report? I can't see any hands up, so we are happy to note the position in the report. Diolch, Chris.
So next is the procurement and scheme of delegation compliance report. So here the committee is asked to note that there have been 3 single tender actions during the period, which have a total value of £507,250 excluding VAT, and 4 change control notices totaling £100,463 excluding VAT. So the total combined value of these is £607,713 excluding VAT. Again, this is just for noting, but happy to take any questions if there are any.
Diolch, Chris. Are there any questions on the procurement scheme delegation and compliance report? How do we demonstrate value for money, Chris, as we look on the single tender waivers? How do we assure ourselves that we are getting the best value for money? And are there any other options? Clearly, there are 5 different individual cases here, but it'd be helpful just to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the team have follow a number of controls in place just to make sure they go through the right checks and balances with regards to the total value of the contract, and also the nature of the spend as well. There are some areas where, again, there are only certain providers that can provide that type of activity. So again, that in that respect, we would follow that process through, and again, the commercial team would negotiate on that basis. But with regards to others, then again, we just make sure that we follow those processes and controls that we have internally to test it and make sure that we are getting best value from the contracts.
Thank you, Chris. We are being asked to note the report, which I'm sure that we are happy to do so, and thank you for that explanation. Then our next is the losses and special payments verbal update, if there are any.
So these are none to note on the losses and special payments. So I'll move straight through to the financial grip and control review. So this was initially a request from the Director General of Health and Social Care Services at Welsh Government, and the exercise and the template is actually based on a template issued from the NHS Wales Performance and Improvement Financial Planning and Delivery team. So we have undertaken this exercise. I was just going to ask Mark Cox, as our Associate Director of Finance, just to step through the review that we've undertaken and the next steps that we will be taking as a result of it.
Thank you, Chris, and bore da. In terms of the exercise, as Chris mentioned, this is undertaken as part of the assessment developed by the NHS Wales Financial Planning and Delivery Directorate. In terms of the approach, the self-assessment against the national framework covered 8 key themes. Those included governance, financial management, workforce, vacancy controls, sickness and leave controls, temporary staffing, staff payments, procurement, and wider controls. It involved evaluating both whether these controls were appropriate, they exist, and whether the controls were operating in an effective way. In terms of the DHEW assessment, the conclusion was positive. The review provides reasonable assurance that DHEW has a robust financial control environment, and the majority of the core financial disciplines are operating effectively. Some of the key strengths we identified included budgetary control, financial management processes, and workforce controls. That said, there were some areas for strengthening and improvement identified, and they covered 3 broad areas. The first was business case governance. So this is where the existing procedures and templates were in place. The review identified the opportunity to improve organisational awareness, consistency, and compliance. In terms of the next steps, the strengthened organisation-wide framework and approval routes will be implemented. The second area covered value and benefits management. So the assessment highlighted an opportunity to strengthen benefits realisation and post-implementation reviews. The third area identified improvement opportunities in supply performance and commercial oversight. So whilst the procurement was assessed as strong in terms of areas of control, we identified opportunities to strengthen supply performance monitoring, particularly in terms of reviews on financial sustainability, and improve escalation arrangements within the organisation to support non-pay reporting and value for money and management of digitally inflationary pressures. So in terms of looking ahead, these findings will be translated into a targeted improvement plan. And again, the focus will be on strengthening the business case governance, embedding benefits realisation arrangements, and enhancing supply performance management arrangements. So in summary, the assessment provides assurance that DHEW's financial controls framework is operating effectively, supports the organisation's ability to deliver sustainable financial performance, but there are areas for improvement, and we will look into action those over the medium term.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. Just to add, we picked up earlier with Stephen the role of internal audit then in providing a follow-up so they can mark our homework effectively on this. And I think I was also pleased to see in terms of some of the where this was a self-assessment, I think that some of the key themes coming out of the Audit Wales findings also reflect what we've reflected. So so I felt fairly comfortable with that as well. But just pause there and open that to any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from the wider committee? I think the introduction you've presented, as well as the papers, answer any queries that we might have. But it's clearly an important area for us. What would you describe as probably the most challenging area in terms of really delivering in terms of financial grip and control?
I think so personally, my response to that is developing our investment appraisal process, which is linked to the business case aspects of it. So the reason that will be challenging, I think, is because that will take an organizational response to buy into that as a process. And I think, again, some of the reflections I've had in that area is that we have across our portfolio programs which have gone through different levels of development in that investment appraisal cycle. So we have had instances where we're just asked to deliver a program. It's not necessarily come with a business case or followed a sequence of steps to develop that, and we need to respond to that as an organization. So I think that we've got a model that we can work to develop it, but it's going to take some time, I think, for that model to mature and be adopted across the organisation.
I'm sure the work that internal audit are about to progress will be certainly helpful in that context as well. So thank you, Chris,
absolutely.
for that. So we are noting the outcome of the grip and control assessment review and the areas highlighted for improvement. And I'll hand back to you for the final paper that we have before us.
Thank you, Marion. And this is the final one. So this is a request to approve the socially responsible procurement objectives. So this paper sets out the legislative context and duties required by authorities under the Social Partnership and Public Procurement Act. Key to this is that we as an organisation set and publish socially responsible procurement objectives, that we then take all reasonable steps to achieve these. We publish a socially responsible procurement strategy, and that we publish an annual socially responsible procurement report. Now this builds on some of the work where we did deep dive into the foundational economy at the audit committee last month. In terms of meeting those requirements, I would note, as it sets out in the paper, that shared services are developing a procurement strategy for NHS Wales. So we will engage and align with them to make sure we've got a national consistent approach. As part of that, though, local authorities and us as a statutory body, as an SHA, we need to set our own socially responsible procurement objectives. So we're proposing to set 6 of these, which are designed to support our wellbeing objectives, which are set under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and those are contained again within the paper to note. And also our socially responsible procurement objectives have been developed in line with the guidance issued by Welsh Government. So again, across the 6, they are to increase ethical, sustainable and low carbon procurement across all digital and data related supply chains. Secondly, to strengthen due diligence on labour, human rights and fair work throughout digital supplier ecosystems. Thirdly, to increase opportunities for SMEs and the foundational economy to participate in digital procurement. Fourthly, to ensure that all major procurements include digital inclusion, accessibility and Welsh language requirements. Fifth, to reduce waste, which includes digital waste, devices, hosting inefficiency and redundant data storage generated through procurement activity. And finally, sixth is to enhance requirements for data protection, cybersecurity, and AI ethics within supplier contracts. So just in terms of how we then are intending to progress those, we will incorporate these into all procurements following approval and work to embed those across the organisations. We would then liaise with shared services on the development of the strategy aspect of socially responsible procurement. And finally, we'll need to work to prepare a report, which will be for next year, which will be the first annual socially responsible procurement report to be produced following the end of the financial year. So hopefully that provides a summary overview of the paper, and the committee have been asked to approve the socially responsible procurement objectives, but also happy to take any questions on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for highlighting those key objectives before us. And as Chris said, there will be, well, what will be the first annual report of its kind coming to board at the end of the financial year. Unless there are any questions, can I just check that we are minded to approve the socially responsible procurement objectives, which I think we are. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr, Chris. And that brings us, I think, to the end of that particular section. We'll move on now then to agenda item 5.3. Now, committee members will be aware that at each of our meetings, we receive a deep dive as part of our board assurance framework meeting reporting. And for today's meeting, this will be the PADR process, which you'll recall was a specific request arising from our last meeting. So I will now invite Sam Morgan and Anna Evans to introduce this item and to take us through the presentation. Sam first. Diolch.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper was written by Anna Evans, who, as you said, joins us for this item, which is for noting. I'll take the paper as read, but I wanted to bring out to your attention some of the key points. So the PADR deep dive was undertaken in response, as you said, Chair, to the request for a clear root cause analysis of why compliance hasn't consistently met our 85% target, which is the statutory target set out by Welsh Government. The review itself used ESR PADR extracts to test compliance against that 85% target, and we compared trends month on month, going back 14 months by directorate, team, manager, and overdue and no record categories as well. So we also then triangulated that and we validated anomalies with ESR and directorate managers who've been instrumental in supporting this work. And we also looked at staff moves, supervisor hierarchy, and completed PADRs not yet recorded on our system as well. So just to stress that the work focused on whether PADRs had taken place and been recorded. It didn't assess the quality of the PADR discussions themselves or the quality of the objectives being set. But we have got a Q4 advisory audit that will look at that aspect. So I just wanted to assure board that this is quite narrow in scope, but a fuller audit will be undertaken towards the end of the year. So in terms of the actual findings of that deep dive, we have identified multiple factors which have contributed to the drop in compliance. And of the 14 months that we looked at, 10 of those fell short of that 85% compliance rate, although we're near to it and didn't drop below 80% for any point in time. So just to give a little bit of scope around that as well. So what we found was that it's, as colleagues will appreciate, it has been a very intense 12-month period. We found that some line managers had deprioritised PADRs due to the competing demands during high pressure periods. We observed a lack of follow-up with end-to-end PADR processes as well. What I mean by that is some managers might have started to do the PADR but not have recorded it in ESR, and therefore it wasn't captured as a completed record. So that end-to-end is really, really important. We also observed in terms of some of the reasons why managers had deprioritised and why there was that dip in completion, that there was lots of change happening in the organisation at that point in time as well, particularly in our operations directorate, who have the majority of staff. There were also leadership gaps as we went through restructuring and OCP, and they have contributed also to that, and then getting all of that data updated in ESR. So the hierarchy of who is the new PADR appraisal manager, that takes time to flow through as well. So what we saw was a delay in managers handing over to the new manager, and that created that dip. And I think the other thing to say is that when we pull the data, it is at a point in time that we pull that data, so it does fluctuate. So on a plus note, I'm really pleased to say that the analysis shows that compliance has improved significantly since April 2026. And the position moved from 80.38% at the end of April to 83.72% at the end of May. And then as at the 23rd of June, it was at 84.8%, so 85%, just short of that target. But as of yesterday, our compliance has reached 87.6%. So that's at the 13th of July, which is really pleasing. So this means that we're now above the 85% target, which is encouraging, and I think demonstrates that focused action is having impact, and there has been a lot of attention and action in this space. However, I recognise that the key assurance point for board is sustainability, and that will be really important as we move forward. So we need to maintain this improvement now through routine management practice rather than short-term recovery activity. We're very conscious of that. So a number of strengthening actions are now in place to support the shift from what we've been doing as retrospective chasing to ensuring that we've got embedded control. And some of these actions include moving to weekly outstanding lists, so really keeping on top of what's coming up, what's out of date now, and making sure that we've got a 30, 60 and 90-day forecasting and RAG escalation on monthly ESR hierarchy validation as well. And the aim is that managers have got visibility. They can see what's due in advance, they can plan the conversations across the year, and they can resolve the recording or reporting issues earlier, so we don't get into that cycle that we've seen. I think one of the important parts of the improvement plan is how we sequence as well the PADRs across the year. So part of our analysis shows that that activity is not evenly distributed. We are very confident that the spans of control mean that PADRs are manageable for each of the managers. That was something that we looked at in detail, but that activity across the year, we do see that there are peaks at certain times in the year for certain functions. So, and this we've identified is probably linked to the annual planning cycle. It's new starters that have come in and then have their annual review. And also maybe the holding back around IMTP approval and objective setting, because managers genuinely want to align objectives with IMTP approval. So we will, as part of our improvement plan, support directorates to profile that PADR activity more deliberately across the year. We're using those forward forecasts to identify future peaks and bring in conversations forward where appropriate. There's no issue in bringing conversations forward, and that will avoid the compliance relying on a single recovery period then. And that will help PADRs become part of that planned management cycle. So again, in terms of looking a little bit further out around improvements which will support that embedding, we have, as you know, we've procured a platform called MyPerform, my LMS, my learning management system, which has a module called MyPerform. And this will really streamline PADRs in the future, but not just that. It will also provide us with an opportunity to put that visibility in front of the manager at the touch of a button, whereas now we're doing lots of manual work in the background. So in terms of efficiency and effectiveness for the future, that will really help visibility of objectives, overdue reviews, reporting line changes and compliance. So that would be immediately available. And just to come, as I'm concluding and coming to an end, so the assurance to board is that the organisation does understand the causes of that variation, has recovered the position above the target now as we speak, and is putting in place stronger controls to sustain that compliance. And the next focus of work will be on reducing overdue PADRs month on month and preventing those new overdue cases. So in summary then, and to conclude, I hope that colleagues will see that the position has improved greatly, now above the 87% target, but the focus is on sustaining that through stronger directorate ownership, better forward planning, and clearer line management accountability. So I'm therefore asking board to note the improvement and the actions being taken and the continued focus on embedding PADR as a routine part of good management practice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. That's a very, very welcome update on the controls that have been put in place since we instigated this review. Thank you. Very pleasing position. I got Alistair first of all, and then Laura.
Thanks, Marianne. Thank you, Sam. And it's very interesting to read. It's particularly challenging, I think, in the public sector to maintain a highly effective PADR or equivalent, because it can quickly turn into process when there isn't a gain at the end of it for the individual. You know, so if there aren't incentives, if there isn't a sense of reward, then why should people be committed to it? I recognize that is very challenging, and I wonder, and it's not to suggest we're not doing this, it's really an open question, Sam. Do we put enough effort behind personal development, which can be the reward, which can be the incentive for a really effective PADR, as opposed to one which is all about process? You know, in terms of personal development, you know, that they've gained from, and different things that can be added to that to heighten it in terms of identifying it, celebrating it, and so on. And I wonder if we look at other organizations in the public sector just to see how they also manage some of this. So I'm aware of other public sector organizations that, for example, and we may be doing some of this, Sam, so forgive me, you know, where they will, for example, say to individuals, look, you know, you can have the opportunity to do 2 or 3 days a year of voluntary work. And we're going to work with these 6 organizations. You can identify which you are, and by stepping outside the organization, they can gain a new level of insight, a new level of, you know, motivation. They can value those things, or that they can be placed on a list of individuals who could be in a role swap for a period of days, or you know, like buddying up to see what other parts of the organization do. Just, you know, ways of taking it out of process, Sam, that actually are about personal development, that can be the reward that, you know, is probably the really important thing behind all this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Your point is well made, I think, in terms of the development plans and the importance of them in terms of genuine health and well-being and staff morale as well. Sam, would you like to respond?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Alistair. And I think that is a really good point. And this isn't just about ticking the box and the numbers of completion and the compliance. This is about what difference does that conversation make, both to people being really clear about the work that they're doing and the value that they're adding, but also about how they're developing and those opportunities. To answer your question, I think it's probably variable, and when we have our deep dive at the back end of the year, I'm really curious as to what that will show, but my gut instinct tells me that it will be variable. I think we have a challenge in terms of time allocated and for development. So we do have development as part of our appraisal process. It's part of the discussion, it's part of the form. and we do have development plans. What we are hearing through our staff survey is that people haven't got the time then protected to be able to go and do those activities that they set out with best intent at the start of that period to complete. So I think we as an organisation need to think really carefully about how we do create that time and space for people to engage in their development, because that again is something that is showing up in our leaver stats as being the main reason for people leaving our organisation, albeit we are acting as a pipeline really for the rest of the system in most of those instances. So we are feeding the pipeline, but yeah, that is something that people do tell us. So really good challenge, and we do need to strengthen how we create the time and the space for people and how we have those really good conversations with people. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Laura.
Diolch, Marion. My Alex and Cantaf. I think Alex was first, if that's okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you, Marion. So Sam, interesting presentation. You mentioned the performance module in my LMS to take the PDRs. I wonder when that's going to be going live and the process will change from the current ways working.
So our target date is September, Alex, and we're currently building all of that, our DHEW needs into that system so that it's customized for us and does what we needed to do. So that work, yeah, September is our target date for that work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that's going to be such a helpful tool, isn't it, to make that sort of cultural step change that we're all keen to see. Yeah. Laura.
Diolch, Marion. I was just interested in the work that's going to be done later on in the year, obviously in conjunction with NWSSP, Steve and the team, and your audit on the PADRs, because I think it's really important that we are above that 85% target, but it's more about the quality, as you've mentioned. So it'd be really interesting whether there's some metrics around what percentage of staff see those as valuable versus the completion rate. I think there's more of a focus on, our staff getting what they should be and what they want out of the PADR discussions versus the completion rate.
That's a good point, Laura, and that audit work is happening in Q4, I think, Sama?
Yes, it is, and very much part of, from what I've seen of the draft audit, that is very much part of it. And I think there's also an opportunity for us to build into My Perform that instant feedback after your appraisal has happened as well, so that we can take continuous temperature checks. And I think Ivan spoke earlier, didn't he, about, this is about continuous improvement. So having information that we can continuously act on rather than a once a year deep dive into something and then kind of be retrospective around it. Chair, may I just take this opportunity as well to reflect the work that Anna has done in this space. Anna has led this work and has worked really closely with the directorate management teams across the organisation. So it's thanks to Anna that we have all of this data and analysis and the action plan that we've presented today. And I'd just like to commend Anna for the way that she's done that work in collaboration with others across the organisation. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Sam. And can I echo Sam's comments as well? It's been really pleasing to understand the wealth of work that's been undertaken over the past few months, and pleasing to see that we have compliance currently, and that stands well above our target position at 87.1 or 6, certainly at 87.7. Very pleasing position to be in. But as you say, it's now about sustainability. And from what we've heard this morning, clearly there are a number of controls and measures in place which will help us get to a sustainable position going forward. Knowledge is power, and having that sort of real-time feedback, I think, could be transformational. So thank you for all the work you're doing and for allowing the committee for assurance to understand in greater detail the wealth of work that's happening in this area. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. We'll move on then to the Corporate Risk Register, agenda item 5.4, and I'll now invite our Board Secretary, Chris Darling, to update us on the Corporate Risk Report with specific attention to the risks assigned to this committee. Chris Darling.
Yeah, Marion. Yeah, I'm just going to run through the current position. So there's 17 corporate risks on the risk register at the moment, 3 of which are allocated to the Audit and Assurance Committee. So I'll spend a bit of time just working through those. Just to update those, since the last committee meeting, full committee meeting, 6 new risks have come onto the register, 5 have been removed. And also worth noting, a fairly significant amount of work has happened over the last month or so, working with the Portfolio Delivery Committee Chair to set, as per the remit letter, ask of DHEW to set risk tolerance, understand the escalation process to Welsh Government for programme risks. So that work has been going on for the last month. It will conclude next week when we would have gone through all major programmes, working with independent chairs, as I said, our PDC committee chair, and then setting that risk tolerance for each of the programmes. In terms of the committee and the risks assigned to the committee, so I'll just run through these, and good to have Sam on because a couple of them are workforce related, and Mark and Chris. DHEW 0331, the fixed term resource funding risk, that remains a risk. There has been significant work to mitigate this risk, and obviously the recruitment pause at the moment has impacted this. So that's the first one. The second one allocated to the committee is 0337, Sustainable Digital Services Development Funding Model. So that's been an ongoing risk for us, but just to highlight, within our escalation level 4 TI framework, as board members will know, there is clear reference to Welsh Government in terms of responsibility for working with DHEW to address sustainable funding. So that was very much welcomed. And 0355, the remit letter recruitment pause, that's a risk that's also allocated to this committee. The impact that recruitment pause is having in a number of ways, both on delivery, staff morale, etc. So those are the 3 risks assigned to the committee. I'll just see if Sam, if you want to comment on the remit letter recruitment pause and the fixed term resource funding risks, and if Mark and or Chris want to comment on the sustainable development funding risk.
I think it continues to be challenging, Chris, in terms of the situation that we're in. Yeah, we met yesterday to discuss this in more detail, Chris, myself and Michelle, who oversees programmes. And we have got challenges, particularly in cyber and particularly in IG, where we do need to recruit to critical roles. We have set up our strategic resource operating group, which is very much trying to identify resource in different parts of the organisation we can redeploy on a short-term basis to really make sure that we're agile and that we plug in the gaps that we need to plug in this recruitment pause. But I think the honest kind of response to that is that it is putting pressure on our teams and it will impact delivery, and we've seen that in our programme management boards, and yeah, it is an ongoing challenge for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, and there is the process, isn't there, that we can escalate to government in exceptional circumstances.
Yes, and we have done that for 4 roles. We're just waiting for confirmation to proceed on those 4 critical roles. Thank you.
Diolch. Sam, Chris?
Yes, but just to add a point onto the remit letter recruitment pause risk, that was the recruitment pause was directly linked to the submission of our baseline review within the remit letter for Welsh Government. So I just wanted to notify the committee that we have submitted our baseline review to Welsh Government in line with the deadline of the 30th of June. So we would now await Welsh Government feedback on that position to see if we can release the recruitment pause. And there was part of the next steps that we had proposed and suggested within the baseline review that, again, we pick up that conversation around the sustainable funding model. So again, just to notify that these are formally on the record actions that we're taking to address these risks. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. And Chris, just on that, because the Sustainable Digital Services Development Funding Model risk, I think some of the baseline review work was helpful in terms of knowledge and understanding of our funding flows, benchmarking, etc. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, so I think just briefly, again, my hope with that as a piece of work is that it sets out a clear evidence base for which to have a future conversation. I think we have dealt with some levels of evidence, but quite a lot of perception as well in terms of our position. So I'm hoping that the baseline review sets again the evidence base of our historic position, but also looks at, again, a way forward in terms of how we are able to fund digital services in the future, and does draw in some context of previous pieces of work that we've done with the HFMA, looking at some national benchmarking of investment in digital across the UK 4 nations, and also draws in some comparators with Gartner, who we used to support some of the benchmarking work as well.
Yeah, Chris. Chair, so I'll just I guess summarise that the last 3 months or so, I think there's been a number of pieces of work. The baseline review that Chris referred to, the recruitment pause, the DPIF pause and review, all of which have brought uncertainty to kind of future delivery, and they are risks that we're actively working through. There are processes in place. I think we've got a board briefing session next week or the week after, just to update on the DPIF pause and review. But so I will I'll stop there unless anyone wants to comment any further, and happy to take any further questions.
It's better. Thank you, Chris, with apologies for using my mic inadvertently. You captured those risks very, very clearly. Can I check whether there are any observations that anybody want to make? So you mentioned the board briefing we had in a few days' time, so that will be an opportunity to dwell in more detail on these risks. The recruitment issue, the recruitment freeze. We've talked also, we've heard earlier today about, the importance of upskilling staff and the challenges as we shift staff to new roles within the organisation. The challenge of suitably upskilling individuals for potentially new roles. That's quite a risky area as well, isn't it, to be able to do that effectively? Sam, I don't know whether there's anything you'd like to add on that.
Yes, Marianne, the setting up of the Strategic Resource and Oversight Group and the challenges that we've got in terms of roles becoming vacant and then not being able to recruit and having to really rely on internal resource. It is showing up that it is challenging in some of the areas to pick and place and do quick retraining of people to meet the needs. Some of these roles require quite lengthy training and development, which again then places more focus on our strategic workforce planning, which we are really doubling down on, and that is helping to that extent. But I think the other challenge that we do have is that where we do need to upskill people, because of where we are as an organisation and a system around cost, the funding isn't naturally there to be able to invest in that upskilling. So I think we've got a number of different challenges at this point in time that are leading to the risk that we have just talked about. and it's really challenging, isn't it, to square that off in the current environment.
Thank you, Sam. Unless there are any other comments, I suggest we draw this item to a close then. And we are noting the risk assigned to this committee and the status of the corporate risk. Thank you very much. Let's move on then to the Welsh language report, which includes the new Welsh language strategy, which we're being asked to approve, Welsh language scheme annual report, and the More Than Just Words annual report. So I will now invite Laura Torrey to present the Welsh language standards report for and Welsh language strategy for today. Laura, diolch.
Diolch yn fawr, Marian. Mae bleser cyflwyno hyn heddiw. It's a pleasure to present this report here today. So the paper, as you mentioned, presents 3 Welsh language documents for approval. So 2 of which are statutory, and those are the Welsh Language Scheme Annual Report and then the More Than Just Words Annual Report. So I'll take those 2 first if I can. So the Welsh Language Scheme Annual Report provides assurance on compliance activity undertaken during 25-26 and demonstrates progress in areas such as staff training, service delivery and recruitment process arrangements. It also confirms that no complaints relating to Welsh language service provision was received during the period, so that's positive as well. The Mwy na Geiriau annual report provides assurance on DHW's contribution to the Welsh Government's National Action Plan, and that demonstrates progress in workforce development, digital systems capability, leadership culture, and importantly, the promotion of the active offer. But I would like to particularly draw the committee's attention today to the Welsh language strategy that you referenced, Chair. So this really represents quite an important milestone for us as an organisation. It's the first of its kind for DHCW, and it sets out a clear and focused journey for how we'll strengthen Cymraeg across our workforce, our culture and the digital services that we provide to the NHS in Wales. We've done a focus to move the strategy beyond compliance and towards ambition. So our aspiration articulated in the strategy is to become an exemplar bilingual organisation, building capability, confidence and systems that are needed to support the use of Cymraeg in everyday work in life and within digital products and services that we develop. So the strategy will focus on a number of key priorities which are outlined in the associated document. So mainly around building Welsh language confidence across our workforce, increasing skills capability, embedding Cymraeg considerations into leadership and organisational culture, and then ensuring our digital systems are bilingual by design and capable of supporting Welsh language service delivery. You'll see in the strategy we've got a structured roadmap with clear measures and actions that give assurance that the strategy is a deliverable piece of work, and we'll bring an update on those within our routine reporting to this committee. But finally, I just want to highlight 2 risks that are included in the report itself in section 5. So the one is workforce capability. So there has been positive progress in achieving the ambition of increasing functional Welsh language skills. Ensuring that all staff achieve courtesy level Welsh is quite a high target, but it will require sustained leadership commitment and engagement from across the whole organisation. And then the second then relates to recruitment. So committee members will note in the report that we have no dedicated funding for targeted Welsh language recruitment activity, which then that limits our ability to proactively attract Welsh speaking candidates into key roles where language skills will have the greatest impact. So we're working with colleagues across the organisation, particularly finance people and OD, about addressing some mitigating actions against those key risks. But that is all I wanted to highlight. I would like to extend my thanks to the Welsh language teams, Valeri and Rhys, for their support and engagement in delivering the strategy. I feel very proud and privileged to present it here today, but happy to take any comments or questions. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Laura. Mae'n bleser cael derbyn y strategaeth newydd. It's a real pleasure to receive this brand new strategy, which is ambitious and includes some really demanding stretch targets as well. Now, you've helpfully highlighted those key risks at the end. And I guess I'd just like to tease out that risk around the funding for dedicated, targeted recruitment in terms of Welsh language posts. And I just wonder, are we talking about a large sum of money? It is surprising, given that we are launching an ambitious strategy, that we haven't been able to find an acceptable compromise, I guess. We adequately fund posts where English language is essential. It's in some ways surprising that we are not able to find an acceptable compromise. And I just wonder whether Sam would like to comment in this respect.
I think it's an important aspect of what we've committed to our workforce, and it lends itself to the inclusive organisation theme that we have within our people strategy. I think it's really challenging, Marianne, in terms of the financial situation and the reductions that we're already being made to, we're already making commitment to across the year. Yeah, I guess it's more of a Chris question in terms of whether or not we should do it. Absolutely, we should. It's just how do we finance it? If I had it in my budget, Laura, I would offer that up gladly. But as you know, I am already kind of behind in terms of committed savings. So yeah, it's a challenge, Marianne.
I agree. I think it is. I think it is a challenge, and it's a challenging financial position that we face again this year. And I think some of this we did pick up as part of our baseline review, because we did quite in-depth directorate by directorate reviews in terms of what funding is available and what's not. And also we were asked by Welsh Government as part of the remit letter, the question there was, what could you do this financial year to go beyond financial balance, so actually to deliver surplus? So that's a reflection of the pressure that we are under as an organisation. And again, needless to say that actually the wider NHS financial position is incredibly under pressure as well. So I think with this as a particular area, I think we probably need to have a look at it and also see how we could be more innovative as well in terms of use of funds, because I also think that the resources that we're talking about here are also quite scarce resources. So there's an opportunity for us to reflect on that in a position and look at what we could do within the financial constraints that we have upon us.
Thanks, Chris. Laura.
Diolch. Yeah, I think the challenge is right there. We are operating in a financially difficult landscape. We do work quite innovatively with our communications team, and we try and promote and target audiences using our platforms that are available to us. I think where I'd like to see us go in terms of budget is this time, sort of next year, when we're looking at budget setting, is seen as included as a core rather than an add-on, because I think when it's included as an add-on, that's where we can, it's not sort of not embedded, and that's where then you can look to make the savings. So I'd like to see it embedded in the recruitment budget. As a whole, recruitment activity shouldn't really be separated for English and Welsh. It should be all encompassing. Is where I'd like to see us go. But yeah, happy to work with people in OD Finance and then using what we can across the organisation to target and be more innovative as much as we possibly can. But grateful for the committee's support with that. Diolch.
Thank you, Laura, and I think you put your finger on it. It shouldn't be an add-on, it should be embedded across the organisation if we're serious about successfully implementing what is a hugely important strategy. It's perhaps just worth reminding the committee and worth reminding DHCW this is a legislative and statutory requirement. And it is a significant shift in context for DHCW, and I think it's important that we recognise this. I think it might be helpful to just reflect on what are we talking here in terms of monetary terms. It cannot be a large sum. So I think anything we can do to embed this and not seeing the Welsh language as an add-on which can be sort of paused or not, as the case may be, depending on the financial context, I think is an important point going forward. But really, thank you to you, Larry, and your colleagues for developing this strategy. Really stretch targets and changing the dial and getting, especially in the context of the challenges that DHCW faces in terms of the recruitment fees, so trying to change that dial on better reflecting the population of Wales within our workforce won't be easy. But you've set yourself some really stretched targets, and I look forward to receiving updates during the course of the year in what is a very important piece of work. Diolch yn fawr and congratulations again on the strategy, which I take it we as a committee are happy to approve. Diolch yn fawr iawn. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. I will liaise with Laura and colleagues in terms of highlighting key risks and items for escalation to board for noting. And I don't have any other urgent business reported to me now. So can I thank you all for your engagement and contributions throughout this meeting. We will take a 10-minute break now, and I suggest we reconvene in 10 minutes' time for our private session. The date of our next meeting, as you see, is October the 6th. So, diolch yn fawr I chi gyd am eich cyfraniadau bore yma. Thank you all for your engagement, and we'll see you again shortly.